Welcome to Wine Soundtrack South Africa. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Morena Kalo, and today I am sitting with Alex Starey from Keermont Vineyards. Welcome, Alex. Can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Alex. I am married with 2 children. I run Keermont Vineyards. I have been here since 2005, and I take care of both the viticulture, the vineyards, and the winemaking side, and absolutely love it here. I've been here for some time now, and it really feels like home.
That's awesome. You really, in our conversation earlier, you told me that you were here from the get-go. But tell us, where will we find Keermont if we end up in Cape Town? How would I get here?
Keermont is about an hour outside of Cape Town. One needs to drive in a easterly direction. You've got to head towards Stellenbosch. And we are between Stellenbosch and Somerset West, and you've got to drive up into the valley, into the mountains. People always say that it feels like they're going up and up and up into this valley and getting completely lost. When people are about halfway up the road, they normally phone me to say that they're lost, and I say, no, don't worry about that. You just keep going, keep driving. So you're really up at the top of a beautiful valley between the Stellenbosch mountain range and the Helderberg, right where those 2 mountain ranges meet.
And it really is a beautiful part of our winelands here. Tell me, how many hectares of land do you have here, and roughly how many cases of wine do you produce annually?
So we have a total actually of about 160 hectares of land, but it's very mountainous, and so we only have about 30 hectares of vineyards established. All of them are little pockets of land sort of cut out on the mountainside. We have 13 different cultivars planted, and we make all of our wine from that 30 hectares, so we don't buy any fruit in from anywhere else. And the total number of bottles on a sort of annual basis is anywhere between 60 and 80,000 bottles per year at the moment, which goes through the winery, all bottled by hand and packaged by hand.
And tell me about the wines that you make. Are they traditional? What varietals do you make? That'll be interesting to hear about that.
So we make quite a few wines. We've got 10 different wines or so. So as I mentioned, they're all estate wines, and we make everything from a dry white blend called terroir, which is Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Viognier. And then we do varietal wines of Syrah, Cabernet, and Merlot, which are very sort of traditional for this area. Those are varieties which have in the past have done well in this area. And then we do a estate red blend, which is made up of those varieties plus a couple of extra blending components, things like Petit Verdot and Malbec. Then we have what we call the single vineyard series, which is an old vine Chenin Blanc, which is about 2,000 bottles of each of them. One Cabernet Franc and 2 Syrahs. And the 2 Syrahs are called Steepside and Topside, and we did them specifically to compare the Helderberg versus the Stellenbosch mountain. The one is on one block on each, and they're very different wines, even though they come from the same farm. And then lastly, and certainly not least, is we do a dessert wine called Fonte, which is a vine-dried Sauvignon Blanc, and now we've started to blend a little bit of Roussanne into that too.
Very nice. So I know obviously we can buy your wine here in South Africa, but for our international listeners, which markets will we be able to find Keermont wines at?
So we sell to a number of different markets. One of our oldest relationships is with America. We sell to an importer in Viognier who is a national importer, so he can distribute to any of the states in America, so anybody can access it there. In the UK, we have a very good relationship with a company called Swig, and they have an online presence and are selling a lot of our wine at the moment. Good friends as well. And then a number of countries in Europe, so Belgium, Holland, Switzerland, France, then into Scandinavia, Sweden as well. So quite a few countries, then across to Japan and China too, and then lots of interesting little markets which I really want to visit, places like Mauritius and the Seychelles and those sorts of areas where I'd love to get into. I have a very good friend who imports our wine into Reunion too. So those are very interesting for me being a surfer. I'd love to get there and go and market the wine in those places, but we generally end up more in the States and in the UK and Europe. Yeah.
Please let me know. I'm happy to come and help marketing, certainly in the Seychelles and Mauritius and those beautiful exotic places. Tell me, Alex, your first memory that is relevant to wine. Can you remember that special moment?
Yeah, very much so. There's definitely things, I've even had to ask myself the same question. I grew up on a farm down the road where we grew a number of different, we farmed things like pears and plums and citrus, but we also farmed grapes, and we used to load the grapes into a big hopper on the back of the truck and take them down to the local cooperative and drop them off there. And I used to go with my dad and watch these big, the big dump trucks dumping all their grapes into the big hoppers. So that was definitely something which stuck with me. My dad would then follow, I'd stand around while my dad chatted to the winemaker, and we'd watch all the grapes being processed through the machines. So that was definitely something which sticks in my memory as something which I found fascinating. I still find it fascinating. I love going to the big cooperatives and watching the big machines working. And then also growing up, my parents were very open to us having a glass of wine or a little tumbler of wine. So I can very clearly remember my dad pouring us a glass of wine. I preferred the whites over the reds, and we knew Jan Boland Coetzee down at Friesenhof, and those were the first wines that I remember. KWV wines and Jan's wines, in particular Tulane Hill Chardonnay used to be like my favorite, and whenever my dad opened a bottle of Tulane Hill Chardonnay, that was like that I used to love. So yeah, those are sort of the old memories, yeah.
And then obviously over time your love for wine grew, and you have tasted many, many wines, I'm sure, over the years. Is there one that stands out as a really amazing wine that blew your socks off along the way?
Gosh, I think it's so important, to keep tasting. We taste as friends, tasting groups and that sort of thing over the years, and keep redefining what you like. I think something that appealed to me 20 years ago doesn't necessarily appeal to me as much today. So we're continuously tasting different wines from around the world and really sort of seeing new things that you find fascinating in wine. But there was a bottle when I was traveling. When was it? About 2003. I visited the Priorat with good friends of mine, Chris Molyneux, and then a couple of other friends who were in the trade at the time. And we spent the weekend in the Priorat, and we visited Ibn Sadi, who was working there, and a couple of other wineries. And as we were leaving, the one guy had been given a bottle of a wine called Chloe Erasmus, which is a really top wine from the Priorat. And he said to me, he wants to drink that wine before he leaves the Priorat. That was his promise to himself. He wanted to taste one of the leading wines from the Priorat before we leave. So he said to me, pull the cork out and let's drink it in the car. And I was like, are you crazy? This is like $100 bottle of wine or whatever it was at the time, like one of those iconic wines. And so he said, no, do it. So I always carry a corkscrew in my pocket, pulled the cork out, and we drank it out of the bottle in the car. And at that point, I tasted this wine and I thought, I'm coming back here. I'm coming to come and work in this place and make wine like this, because I just found the whole thing so fascinating, and the wine was absolutely delicious. So yeah, so probably one of the most influential bottles drunk out of the bottle. And I wrote to Daphne, who's the winemaker at Chloe Erasmus, and pestered her until she gave me a job, and I ended up going back there the following year and working at Chloe Erasmus, and it really sort of defined the types of wines and the type of way that I would like to work in future. So big influence there, yeah.
That's quite an amazing experience. Yeah. So obviously with all your travels, you've tasted some of those kinds of amazing wines. Where did you have kind of one of the worst wines that you've ever had internationally?
Sure, that's a tough question. That is a tough one.
You don't have to name specific names.
No, I wouldn't even remember, because I probably would have just thrown it away. I remember my one harvest I'd done in Chile, and I couldn't get another job, so I flew to Spain, and I thought I would backpack around and just go and knock on doors and try and find work. And I didn't realize, but as I landed in Spain, their Fiesta Mayor started, which is a big holiday prior to harvest, and all of the cellars were closed. And slowly but surely, I ran out of money. I was literally sleeping in a sleeping bag, and I remember very distinctively not being able to afford nice bottles of wine at that stage, and still wanting to have a glass of wine. And I remember tasting some cheap supermarket wines that I could afford, and decided to save my budget for other things rather than continue to drink those.
I don't blame you. So, amongst all of the populations, who do you think drinks the best quality wine?
In terms of all the different nations? Wow, that's a difficult question too, because I think, what I love about the UK market is that and the US for that matter, is that you have so much available to you. All the different wine producing countries are trying to sell wine in those markets, and I think that sort of much more international exposure is fantastic, that people can choose. They like a certain white from Italy, and they like a red from South Africa, and that sort of thing. Personally, I'm quite a Francophile. I love France. I love the sort of the culture in France, the language and everything. And so I would say, like, if I was to pick a producing country that I could choose, I'd say France. Probably tasting all the wines from France.
Fair enough. Tell me something. What is Keermont's most expensive bottle of wine, and how much does it cost?
So last year we sort of redefined our estate reserve bottle, which we now call the amphitheatre. It's based on the concept of the fact that we're between two mountains, and we're almost based in an amphitheatre between these two mountains, and all the vineyards are planted on the hills around the base of these mountains. So it's a blend of different parcels from around the amphitheatre as such. It's a blend which we change from year to year, so it's not a constant blend. At the moment, it is based on Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Syrah, and those will probably be the leading components going forward. We do have a couple of blending components in there too, and we do about 5,000 bottles a year of that, and we sell it at the cellar door. We sell it for about 580 Rand or so.
And tell me, you've pretty much just finished your harvest. Which of the wines currently in your cellar gives you the most joy or satisfaction?
I think, oh gosh, you can't choose between your children. It's very difficult to do that. Oh, they all have their place. I love the Terroir for what it is. It's a beautiful blend. It's our white blend: Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Viognier. based, and then now we've added some Marsanne and Roussanne, and it's just a really complete, really complex wine. It's not super expensive, it's quite accessible to people, and I just think it fits in at any time or place. And then in terms of on the red side, like Syrah for me is just a really exciting variety. I just love the sort of the herbal, spicy nature of Syrah. So I would say if I had to choose a couple, those would probably be them. Yeah.
So Alex, what is your opinion on wine critics and wine scoring as such?
No, I've got to choose my words carefully here. Yeah, it's something which is very necessary. I think the world of wine and wine in general can be very confusing to consumers. It's not something you really need to be into it in order to understand it, and you have to have that sort of wine passion in order to understand it properly. And so I do believe that wine critics and wine scores are very good guides for people. I don't believe that they're the holy grail, because what one wine critic might like, another one might not like. And so for people, I think it's important for people to relate to a wine critic that they agree with as such. So if one makes or rates a wine very highly that they don't actually like that much, they must realize that that's maybe not the palate that they should be following. They should be following another critic maybe. So I think they're important. I think it's important to have somebody comparing the top wines or all the wines in the industry and saying, well, they prefer this one over that one, and this is what's being made. You need some sort of guide there. Wine scores for me, I've found in the recent past that everybody's sort of bunched up into that sort of 90-point plus range now, which for me is a bit unfortunate, because I really feel that a fair wine, an average wine that is a good sort of everyday drinking wine, should be scoring about 50, and then anything that's better than that should be scoring 60 or 70 or 80 or 90. Not your average everyday drinking wine scoring 87, and then anything better than that between 87 and 100. That really gives you very little scope. So I would feel better if your average wines were there, and then it really has to be an absolutely amazing wine to reach the 90-point mark. That would be my point on scoring. But it's necessary. We get it, and we taste a lot of wines, but not everybody has that sort of feel for it, and they need some sort of a guide to what wine to buy, what is better than another wine.
That's certainly a very interesting take on scoring. Maybe some of these scorers should take note. Getting down to wine, as a consumer, what do you turn to most often? Would it be red, white, rosé?
I have found that I've tended towards white wine. Probably because I don't know whether it's something to do with your palate being exposed to a lot during the day, and therefore when you get home at night and you feel like a glass of wine, a white wine can be a lot sort of softer on the palate. We live in a warm environment most of the year, so actually a nice cold glass of white wine is more applicable. But yeah, I like I might have implied already, I love all wines. Somebody said to me, oh, well, what varieties do you like? I really love to try anything from Assyrtiko to Zinfandel, like the full spectrum, as long as it's made craft, in a craft way where somebody has paid attention to detail to it. I'm not a big fan of big blousy styles of wine. I want something which is elegant and refreshing, and preferably made in a fairly sort of old school winemaking style or a traditional winemaking style, as opposed to something which has maybe been used a lot of modern winemaking techniques and a lot of oak to overshadow it. That's not what I like.
Sounds good to me. Tell me, obviously there are times of celebration, and normally most of us celebrate with a bit of sparkling wine. What kind of sparkling wine do you enjoy most? Champagne, Cap Classique? What do you tend to turn to?
I must say it's part of my drinking repertoire, which I need to work on. You know, I don't drink a lot of bubbly, although I would like to. I've started to really enjoy it. I think there's some great Cup Classiques here, really, because of my limited understanding of champagne and, maybe some of the other bubblies from around Europe and the rest of the world, Cup Classique is still very good to me and very, very applicable. So I would say, there are a couple of producers here which are good producers, and I'd probably tend towards those. But I've had obviously a couple of fantastic bottles of champagne, but I need to understand it better before I can actually use it as a reference.
Bubbly makes me happy, that's for sure. So tell me, have you ever paired white wine with red meat and vice versa? What is your ethos on food and wine pairing?
Absolutely, yeah. There are some chefs who just seem to nail it and really be able to find things which work together well. I unfortunately don't cook well enough. I think I do, but I don't. So I find as long as it's not going to clash, there's certain elements within food which you can't cross lines, and they do end up clashing. But personally, I find I like to drink lots of different types of wine, so I don't like to be limited to one thing with one meal. And as we all know, it's so often about the occasion and about what sort of mood you're in, who you're with, what taste. Then the wines all taste good. So I do. I have had great experiences working with our wines with chefs, and they just seem to nail that pairing. But I'm not too particular about, as long as the company is good, the food's good, and the wine's good, I'm generally pretty happy.
I'm going to be assumptive here and assume that, like me, you might have had moments of overindulging in wine. What would be your ultimate hangover cure?
Oh, yeah, no. Unfortunately, I've had quite a bit of experience in that field. It happens on a regular basis. The best hangover cure for me is actually a surf. To get in the car and get down to the beach as quickly as possible when I wake up and get in the sea, because the sea really it freshens you up. We've got the water's quite cold around here, so we have to wear wetsuits and that sort of thing. But that really does the job. And then afterwards, maybe stop for some nice fish and chips or something nice and oily on the way home. Yeah. But bubbly also works quite well, if needs be. Yeah.
Hair of the dog, for sure, definitely. What do you think a non-drinker loses out by not at least trying some of Keermont's wines?
Well, they definitely lose out on the hangovers, which I envy. Look, I think the joy of tasting wines which reflect where they're from is something which, okay, that's a little bit a higher level, but really tasting nuances between one wine and another wine, and something which is delicate and has delicate flavors and character about it. I would say if you say what are you missing out on Keermont wines, I really like to try to get those sort of delicate nuances in our wines, and I'd like to think that that's something which is quite special about them. So those beautiful flavors and aromas that you get would be what I think people would smell or taste, like my kids taste the wines, and I try to get them to enjoy those sort of flavors and everything.
I'm sure you get many, many visitors from all over the world to Keermont. However, if space aliens were to land on Keermont, which wine would you give them to taste?
I think the Fonte, actually. That's the easiest one because it's sweet, so everybody loves it. So the Fonte is a vine-dried. It used to be just purely Sauvignon Blanc. We go through the vineyard when the grapes are ripe with a pair of pliers, and we twist the stems of each bunch. And so we break the stems, and then the grapes dry out on the vine and raisin. And then we give the raisins like a really heavy press, and we extract the sort of syrup from that, and we ferment that up to. It's got a low alcohol, so it's always about 11 11% alcohol, 12% alcohol. Mature it in barrel for a couple of years, and then we bottle it. And I think that would. I don't know what aliens would be into, but I would assume that, something nice and sweet and rich would probably be the best thing to offer them first.
Tell me, do you have any good luck rituals as harvest is about to start? Any special SpongeBob SquarePants underwear that you might wear? Anything like that?
Anything without holes in it? No, I don't know. We always do all of our bottling right up until harvest, and so we're normally rushing through the bottling and hoping that the grapes will wait until we finish the bottling before we start, and then literally clean the tanks and get the grapes in the next day. We play a lot of music in the cellar, and I would say that the days that the music, we don't stop the music. The music can carry on. So it's always the first thing we do when we come in the morning, and I think that creates a really nice vibe in the cellar, and everybody can take a turn with putting on the type of music that they like to listen to, and it just keeps you going. So I wouldn't say that I'm overly superstitious. I've always believed in the harvest moon. That's definitely something which I look out for, and when that big full moon comes up at the beginning of harvest, I know that that's time for action in the cellar. But no, I'm not overly superstitious. I think I'd feel uncomfortable if I couldn't get my SpongeBob SquarePants underpants, ironed in time or whatever. So.
Fair enough. Tell me, many producers are known to talk to their grapes, whether they're out in the vineyards or in barrels in the cellar. Do you talk to them? And if so, what do you usually say?
Look, I spent, being a farmer and looking after the vineyards and being a winemaker in a small cellar, you are often alone. I think that's why I've always had dogs, because they keep you company when you're out in the vineyards and walking up and down the rows. But yeah, I think you have a lot of conversations in your mind and just hoping you'd I've realized actually, you always look at these European harvest parties and the traditional celebrations post-harvest, and I've figured out that you actually do that because you're celebrating the fact that you finally got those grapes off the vine, and you don't have to stress about them anymore. You don't have to stress about the downy mildew or the baboons coming to eat them or the frost or whatever it is. So I guess you're just encouraging your vineyards all the time to get that crop ready. And then the wines, I think it's much more patient. For me in the cellar, it's more about patience and just saying, okay, you guys just chill and get yourselves ready, and one of these days I'm going to bottle you.
So, Alex, when you were a little boy, did you want to become a winemaker? Did you see this in your future, or did you want to be something else?
There were a few other options first. I think the first thing I remember wanting to be was a dolphin trainer. I went to the aquarium with my parents and I saw these dolphins jumping out of the water, and I thought that's where I want to be. So that was the first thing that I thought I would be. But when I was in matric, and everybody's matricers are sort of finishing high school, and everybody starts saying to you, oh, what are you going to study? Where are you going? And what are you doing? And I think anybody of that age gets really nervous. I remember being at home and for some reason the one evening I walked outside. It's probably going for a cigarette or something, as an 18-year-old would do, and thinking, I really love being on the farm, and thinking, okay, well, I think I could see my future in farming, in agriculture. And then I found out that there was this course at Stellenbosch where you could do the viticulture and also do enology, which is the winemaking. And from the moment of starting to get into that and tasting wine, I realized I'd love to be involved with both.
I actually know someone in our industry here in South Africa who was a dolphin trainer once in their life.
I'd be very envious. I think that's a great job.
Tell me, when you're not working, what keeps you busy in your free time?
2 little girls. My wife as well. My wife always creates a nice little list of things to do for me. So constantly hanging pictures in the house or pulling out things in the garden or you name it. 2 little girls, Chloe and Isla, who are, obviously take up a lot of time, and I love devoting a lot of time to them with the greatest of pleasure. And whenever I get free time, I love to hit the beach and go surfing. So whenever I've got a couple of hours off and I can get down to the coast, then I will surf. If I could surf every day, I'd be happy.
Who would you say is your favorite music artist or band or group?
That's another thing. I listen to music 24/7. I wake up and I listen to music till I go to bed. So I'm constantly listening to music. I think if there's anybody alive today, because I like to listen to quite a lot of old music as well, there's an American who was born in South Africa called Dave Matthews, and I would say that the Dave Matthews Band is probably, if I was to choose one artist, that would probably be it.
So you and your wife are out having a romantic dinner, maybe it's an anniversary, whatever it may be, and you're at a beautiful restaurant. Which wine would you order?
That's a good question. Gosh, it would completely depend on the wine list. My wife tends to prefer red over white, so it would probably go on the red side, and we both quite like sort of fresher wines, so maybe something like a Cabernet Franc or a red blend or a Syrah or something like that. But it's a difficult one, if you've got a wonderful wine list and you can give me some examples of what I could choose, then I would do that.
I hear you for sure. Do you support any sports teams or anything like that? Football, Formula One, whatever. If so, who do you support? And if they won the cup or the whatever it is that they do, which wine would you give them?
So I don't anymore. I growing up I did. I was much more into sport, but we don't really have TV at home, and I don't have a lot of free time. So if I do have 2 hours to kill, I'm gonna hit the beach or go exercise, maybe walk in the mountains or something. So I don't actually dedicate a lot of time to watching sport anymore, compared to what a lot of South African men would do. I grew up watching Formula One, and I really loved the Ferrari team. That was like my thing. And so, when they open those massive bottles of mum at the end of the Formula Ones, I really loved that. But yeah, if I had the opportunity to give somebody something, I think a bottle of Keermont, maybe like our flagship, our amphitheater, a nice big magnum of that in a wooden case or something, just to say congratulations. But I don't really spend a lot of time on things like that. That's sort of, maybe one day when I retire, I'll have more time for things like that. But at the moment, life is a bit busy for spending a couple of hours on the couch, unfortunately.
Alex, what is your proudest personal achievement on a work level?
Sure. I think Keermont being ongoing, I think what we are achieving here, I think there's still a long way to go, but I think we've achieved a lot, and the fact that we have built up a little business which actually stands on its own 2 feet now, in my, is really lovely and very satisfactory. I was lucky enough recently to be asked to be a member of the Cape Winemakers Guild, and that was a big personal compliment. It comes very much with a team background. The team has got us to where we are today. I get to take the credit for it, but on a personal, it was an opportunity to just take a breath and say, okay, well, it's quite nice that you got recognized for that sort of thing. But like I say, I really believe that it's a team that's got me onto that. So yeah, I'd say that's nice. But the fact that we're all employed and we made it through lockdown and all that sort of stuff, and we have a business that can afford to pay our salaries, is in itself, quite an achievement.
It really is a big achievement. tell me, what was the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Gosh, I don't know. Stay humble, I guess. I think that's probably the best piece of advice. Winemaking, you're constantly tapping into people for advice. But I think recently listened to a podcast where it was sort of slow down and breathe and not live in a rush and that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know what the best thing is, but I think it's really important to stay to try to stay grounded and stay humble. That's really important in my life.
I think that's a great piece of advice, actually. I'd like you to finish this sentence. A table without wine is like.
Well, there's the obvious answer to that. Oh gosh, obviously a day without sunshine, but it really is. It's barren. A table without wine, any meal without wine is very boring. So a table without wine is like a. Oh gosh, no, I'm gonna need a couple of seconds to think about that. It's like a land without water, I guess. Yeah.
Very good. So you're in this swanky restaurant and there's a VVIP sitting having a meal, and one of your bottles of wine is on the table and there's paparazzi all around. Who is this VIP in your mind that is enjoying your wine?
It would be really nice if it was somebody possibly like Cyril Ramaphosa. I think that would be really cool. And I'm not a massive sports fan, so that doesn't really appeal to me. I really believe that every person is equal, and anybody who's a VVIP is just the same as anybody else. Would be quite nice if it was maybe somebody influential in the wine industry, Robert Parker or James Suckling or somebody like that. That'd be good. So yeah, I guess I don't really, that person drinking that bottle of wine is a big compliment, but anybody opening a bottle of Keermont really thrills me. So yeah.
What do you think the wines will be like in the year 2300?
So what is that, 280 years from now? Gosh, it depends on how we change our attitude towards the earth and with global warming and everything that's happening today, there may not be any wines, or it would be hydroponic or something like that. It's very possible. I would like to think that they're going to be exactly as they are today or they were 100 years ago. That would be ideal. But with climate change, it's quite possible that they're going to be very different, and people may be fighting over natural wines by that stage, as opposed to something which has been grown hydroponically or in tunnels or in a capsule or something.
Indeed, it is something to keep in mind. The world is changing at quite a pace, that's for sure. Name 3 wines you would like to take with you to either a deserted island or in a space travel with Richard Branson, who knows?
Okay, so I've always the desert island wine is amongst winemakers is quite a fun and common question. Like, what would you take? I've always said a really good balanced off-dry sort of sweet Riesling is just a fantastic no-brainer of a wine. You can drink it for breakfast or lunch or dinner. So I think that would be a nice thing to take. Possibly something like a Gamay Syrah, like a really, really top-end Syrah from Côte-Rôtie or Northern Rhone on the red side. And then a beautiful bottle of dessert wine. You can't go amiss with a natural sweet straw wine or possibly a botrytized dessert wine.
Very nice. So, what is a winemaking area in the world that you would really like to explore?
I think on the top of my bucket list at the moment, there's so many. There really are. We recently had wines from the Canary Islands, Tenerife and stuff, which are mind-blowing wines. And I suddenly thought, okay, that's where I have to go and check it out, because the surf is also very good there. But at the moment, the one which I really, really want to do, which I should have done already and would love to do, is the Rhone, the Loire Valley in France. So moving up the Loire Valley, particularly to look at Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc growing there. So it's one which I would love to spend some time in, maybe a week or 3, because it is so diverse, from Muscadet at the coast all the way up to Sancerre in the further up in the inland.
Okay, before we're done, I would like to play a little game. I'm going to mention 3 varieties, and I'd like you to pair each variety with a song.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like you to pair Chardonnay, a Pinotage, and Cap Classique, which is not a variety, it's a sparkling wine, but go for it.
Chardonnay, Pinotage, and Cap Classique. So Chardonnay. Can you give me half a second to think? I'll need to think of lots of different songs. It would be something a little bit richer, maybe like a Nina Simone, like a husky voice. Sugar in My Bowl by Nina Simone. I think that would be quite a good one. Pinotage would have to be something quite smoky, I think. So something like Bob Marley. I love a little bit of reggae, so Bob Marley, Redemption Song maybe. Don't know if that might be a bit too pointed. And then Cap Classique, something bubbly. Maybe Dave Matthews, Celebrate. What's the one now? I think it's called Two Step. It's one of my favorite songs, Dave Matthews' Two Step. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go and listen to that while enjoying a good Chardonnay, Pinotage, and Cap Classique. Alex Starey, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you just like to remind everyone where we can find Keermont? Can they visit the tasting room, and also your website address?
Sure, and probably best to go first to the website, www.keermont.co.za. We are about an hour outside of Cape Town, between Stellenbosch and Somerset West. Quite a long way up the road. Don't worry if you feel like you're getting lost coming up here. It's a lot quicker when you drive back down again after a couple of glasses of wine. Our tasting room is open by appointment from Monday to Thursday, and then Fridays and Saturdays you can just walk in, particularly between 10:30 and 1:30, but we do try to accommodate people outside of those times as well. But those are the official opening times, 10:30 to 1:30 Fridays and Saturdays. But otherwise we love having appointments. We have them all the time, so you can just drop us a line or make a phone call.
Thank you so much, Alex. And just to run past, it's www.keermont.co.za, and Keermont is spelled Keermont. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wine Soundtrack.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack South Africa. For details and updates, visit our website winesoundtrack.com.